Oy, oy, oy. Hi, Shabbat Shalom, Lynn. Good. Howard, Shabbat Shalom. Hi, Nancy. Shabbat Shalom. Hi, Lynn. How you doing? You doing okay? How was Thanksgiving? Yeah? How was your Thanksgiving? Yeah. Is that okay? Well, if you want to have a cup of coffee or grab a tea or something, I could email you and we could take 45 minutes or an hour one day and meet up for a coffee. Yeah, in the new year. I come out a few times a week and we could grab a tea or something. Yeah, you could distract yourself from a little solitude with some of my silliness. Oh, you're sweet. Yeah, they work really well for me. Where's Scarlett, isn't it?
No. That's the cousin.
Where's Scarlett?
That's
Where?
right here. Yeah. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Welcome. We're so happy to welcome those of you who are here in our chapel and those of you who are joining us on the live stream. We're going to begin our service on page 24 of our prayer books, or you can follow along with the words on the screens behind us. Page 24, Shalom Aleichem, welcoming in the Sabbath angels. Please join us. Shalom Aleichem, Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech, Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech, Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
As we light these Shabbat candles, we link ourselves with the generations of people who have kindled these holy flames. Time passes quickly, and we take this moment to pause and express our gratitude. We stand here as a family with humility and with love for this occasion, for one another, and being part of this sacred community. As we participate in this age-old ritual, we embrace this moment as we move forward in the cycle of our lives. Yesterday, we held our daughter in our arms. Tomorrow, she will be called to the Torah as a bat mitzvah. These Shabbat candles remind us not only of the joy of this occasion, but they help us to see the light within one another and the strengths that each of us possesses. Grateful for all the precious gifts in our lives, we kindle the Sabbath lights. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahadlik ner shel Shabbat.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu shel Shabbat. Amen. This week in our Torah portion, we watch as, or hear as Jacob wrestles with a mysterious presence, maybe an angel, maybe an adversary, and at the end of the wrestling, he receives his new name, Yisrael. And this week, one of my cantorial colleagues pointed out that one of the fun things about Hebrew is if you look at the letters and you take out the vowels and you rearrange them, or sometimes look at them with a different eye, sometimes you get a different message. And that Yisrael, which means the one who wrestles, if you looked at it slightly differently, could be Yashir El, the one who sings to God. And so, as we turn to Kabbalat Shabbat, and these words of Shiru Ladonai, inviting us to sing a new song to God each Shabbat, we think about the transformative nature of prayer, of community, of this beautiful tradition that we carry on each week. And so as we turn to this psalm, sing a new song unto God, sing a new song, all the earth, we lift our voices together. Hopefully you'll be transported and maybe even transformed. Page 13 in your prayer books, or on the screens behind me, Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Hu Shemo, Basru miyom liyom Yeshuato. Shiru, Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Hu Shemo, Basru miyom liyom Yeshuato. Zachru v'goyim kevodo, b'chol ha'amim niflotav, ki gadol Adonai, u'mechol ha'meod, nora hu ha'kol Elohim, ki kol Elohei ha'arim melelim v'Adonai shamayim asa. Hod v'chadar lefanav, oz מסרו מיום ליום ישועתו. שירו לאדוני שיר חדש, שירו לאדוני כל הארץ, שירו לאדוני ברכו שמו, מסרו מיום ליום ישועתו. Turning ahead to page 20, we continue with Lecha Dodi.
Turn ahead in our prayer books, page 146. I'll invite you to please rise for the Baruch Hu.
La
read together, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bidvaro ma'ariv aravim, b'chokhmah poteach she'arim, uvitvuna meshane itim, umachalif et hazmanim, umisader et hakochavim, b'mishmarotehem barakia kirtzono, borei yom v'layla, golel or mipnei choshech, v'choshech mipnei or.
Umavir yom umevir laila, umavdil ben yom uben laila, Adonai tzivot shemo. El chai v'kayam, tamid yimloch aleinu le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai, hama'ariv aravim. Amen.
We pray responsively in the English. In each age we receive and transmit Torah. At each moment we are addressed by the world.
In each age, we are challenged by our ancient teaching. At each moment, we stand face to face with truth.
In each age, we add our wisdom to that which has gone before. At each moment, the knowing heart is filled with wonder.
In each age, the children of Torah become its builders and seek to set the world firm on a foundation of truth. Baruch atah Adonai, ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Va'ed. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol me'odecha ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha Veshinantam levanecha, v'dibarta bam, beshivtecha beveitecha, uvlechtecha v'derech, uvshochpecha uvkumecha, ukshartam leot al yadecha, v'hayu letotafot bein einecha, uchtabtam al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru va'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'item kedoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim Liot lachem lelohim, ani Adonai Elohechem. Adonai Elohechem emet.
We worship the power that unites the universe, a promise of harmony for all.
Yet that oneness eludes our grasp as imperfection and evil abound.
Before our eyes there is a vision of perfection, order, and goodness.
There is evil enough to break the heart, and there is good enough to exalt the soul.
When will redemption come?
When we grant everyone what we claim for ourselves.
Long ago we escaped the tyranny of Egypt. Our people saw the power of the Most High.
We learned God's presence redeems time and event, so we celebrate this power that makes for freedom. Chamocha ba'elim Adonai באלים אדוני מי כמוך נהדר בקודש ראו בניך בוקי הים לפני משה, משה ומרים. זה אלינו, זה אלינו ואמרו.
Kivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom v'ha'amidenu shomrenu l'chaim ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Give us a place to rest, O God. Bring us shelter in the long, soft evening shadows of your truth. You are true protection and safety. In your presence we find love and acceptance. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours.
Baruch atah Adonai, haporei sukat shalom, aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim.
Page 155, we rise for the blessings of the Amidah.
Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'koneh Hakol, V'zocher Chastei Avot V'imahot, Umevi Geula Livnei B'neihem, Lema'an Shemo Be'ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah. Atah gibor leolam Adonai, Mechaye hakol, Atah rav lehoshia. Mechalkel chaim v'chesed, Mechaye hakol berachamim rabim. Somech noflim ve'rofeh cholim, Umatir asurim, Umekayem emunato, Lishenei afar. Michamocha ba'al gevurot, Umidom elach. Melech memit umechaye, Umatzmiach Yeshua. V'ne'eman atah lehachayot hakol. Baruch atah Adonai, Mechaye hakol. Atah kadosh v'shimcha kadosh, U'kadoshim b'chol yom yahalelucha selah. Baruch atah Adonai, Ha'el HaKadosh.
Please be seated. This is the moment during our communal prayers when we turn from the words of the prayer book to words of our own hearts and those in our circles of family and community who are in need of a prayer of healing, be it the healing of body, the stillness of soul, the being of our minds when we know that we are okay. So tonight we send our thoughts and we send our prayers to Cindy Baker, Bob Broder, to Ada Barbara Corvelli, Janice Cummins, Bill Foster, Marcy Goldsmith, Julie Levine, Naomi Batsara, and Judy Zucker. To those names, if there are others that you are praying for tonight, whose names you'd like to share with our community, you can feel free to do so. And if you're so inclined, you can share your relationship with that person. Prayers for healing. Yes. Thank you. Yeah, Patty. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Yeah, Dina. Thank you. Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai rofeh cholim. We praise you, Adonai, our God. We call you the healer of those who are sick. We join in this setting of our Misha Berach together. There are so many Hebrew words that are connected. That last word we just sang, shlema, has the same root as shalom, which of course we know means peace, but it really means a sense of completeness, that when we are healed from being ill, we feel a sense of coming back to ourselves. And so, as we pray for peace, we're praying not only for all the ways in which we know what peace could look like, but a sense of wholeness and completeness for ourselves, for our community, and especially for people we don't know all around our world. Shalom Rav, page 164.
Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Ki ata hu melech adon, lechol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech adon, lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. V'tov beinecha levarech et Amcha Yisrael bechol עת ובכל שעה בשלומך. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav, Yisrael Amcha, Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. Tasim
There is a story told of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidic Judaism, who was asked by his students, "Master, how should we determine the hour in which the night ends and the day begins?" One student suggested, "Perhaps it is when a person can distinguish a sheep from a dog while running in the distance." "No," said the rabbi, "it is not." A second student said, "It's when you're walking by a tree and you can tell if it's a date tree or a fig tree." The rabbi says, "Nope, it's not that either." "Please tell us the answer," the students beg. "When can you tell the actual hour when night ends and when day begins?" And the Baal Shem Tov said, "It is when you look into the face of a stranger and you can see that it is your brother or your sister. Until then, night is still with us." As Cantor Fishbein said in this week's Torah portion, we hear of our patriarch Jacob wrestling with an unknown being, receiving a new name. What's interesting is that he renames the place that he has this struggle. He renames it Peniel, meaning I have seen a divine being face to face, and yet my life has been preserved. Later in the Parsha, in the dramatic conclusion to the Jacob and Esau narrative, the brothers reunite after 20 years of estrangement. When offered gifts of livestock and servants, Esau refuses, but Jacob presses him, saying, "Please accept this favor, accept this gift for me, for seeing your face is like seeing the face of God." The students in the Hasidic story are asking a question of law, but the rabbi answers it spiritually. The ability to see another's face and distinguish it from a stranger's is the moment in which a new day can begin. When Jacob sees his brother's face, he is able to see more than simply his kid brother, whose birthright and blessing he stole, but he's actually able to see Esau's humanity and divinity. More than ever, our world needs us to see each of us as made in the image of our Creator. Perhaps it is our mission to live as Jacob and Esau greeted each other, with open arms and generous hearts. And perhaps that is why the Hebrew word for face is panim, a plural noun. For when we see each other's faces, we may also have the opportunity to see the face of God. Sitting in this room, surrounded by the faces you can see, perhaps faces you do not know, or faces of people you love, we take a few moments for our own words, our own silent prayer.
Awaken my soul to all its potential. A letter unique in an infinite scroll. Both a guest and a gift in this life I am living. May I be for a blessing as I come and I go. I come and I go. Awaken my heart to all its potential. A letter unique in an infinite scroll. Both a guest and a gift in this life I am living. May I be for a blessing as I come and I go. I come and I go. Awaken my life to all its potential. A letter unique in an infinite scroll. Both a guest and a gift in this life I am living. May I be for a blessing as I come and I go.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. It's my honor to introduce our guest speaker to you this evening, and just by way of format, Jen is going to speak to us for a little while, and there'll be an opportunity for 2 or 3 or so questions. So if questions come up and you want to keep them in your mind, just know that after Jen speaks, we'll give the microphone to you to, again, to ask questions. Jen Maxfield is an Emmy award-winning reporter and anchor for NBC New York. Prior to joining the station in 2013, she worked for Eyewitness News for 10 years, also as a reporter and substitute anchor. Maxfield's first book, here it is, More After the Break, A Reporter Returns to 10 Unforgettable News Stories, was published by Greenleaf Book Group in July of 2022. Maxfield revisits the most memorable stories she has covered during her 2-decade career, describing in heart-pounding detail how the events unfolded through the eyewitness perspectives and, of course, her own. Returning to the families years, even decades after their stories were featured on the news, gives Maxfield an opportunity to ask the burning question she has always pondered: what happened after the live truck pulled away? Maxfield is also an adjunct professor at the Graduate School of Journalism at Columbia University. She and her husband, Scott Asfeld, met as undergraduate students at Columbia. They live now in northern New Jersey with their 3 children. Maxfield grew up in Tenafly, New Jersey as the oldest of 6, and this Jen I never knew, an 8 varsity letter athlete. She held the Tenafly High School high jump record, 5 feet and 3 inches, for 26 years. I want to know who it is that broke the record, and did you go and shake their hand after it happened? You did. That I knew that was true about you. So, folks, I won't get deep into why I've known Jen for a long time, but we as rabbi and congregant spent some really important spiritual journey together. And with all these extraordinary accomplishments, what I could tell you from firsthand experience is that her magnificent soul and a magnificent heart outshines her accomplishments in the news world. So it is really particularly an honor for me, but for all of us, to welcome to our pulpit, and I should say back home, Jen Maxfield.
Shabbat Shalom. Rabbi Gewirtz did some really good investigative reporting to come up with all of those facts about me, so we should offer you a job at NBC. So you heard a little bit about my bio, though I will tell you that I think Rabbi Gewirtz may have buried the lead, as we like to say in news. So in fact, I am a former congregant here at Temple Bnai Jeshurun. My husband Scott and I started our family living not too far from here, and actually all 3 of my kids were born at St. Barnabas, and we were congregants here till 2010 when we moved to Bergen County, and now we're at Temple Emmanuel in Closter. And also, Rabbi Gewirtz alluded to my spiritual journey, and you may find it interesting to know that as a congregant here, Rabbi Gewirtz really led me on my spiritual journey, which wound up with me converting to Judaism in 2008, in between my first and second child, which is sort of an interesting decision to make, and interesting timing. But perhaps that's the subject of my next book. So I'm here to tell you a little bit about, and I really do appreciate being invited here. It's very special for me to be back here. And this is a very special place in my heart and in my family's heart. I'm looking forward to sharing some pearls of wisdom that I hope that I've gained over my last more than 2 decades of news reporting, starting in upstate New York in the early 2000s. I was in Binghamton, New York, and Syracuse, New York for the ABC affiliates there. And then for the last 20 years here in the New York market, first with Eyewitness News and currently with NBC in New York. And as Rabbi Gewirtz said, I'm also the mom of 3 kids. And I don't want to be the only one talking tonight, and I do look forward to hearing your questions later on. But there were really 2 things that I wanted to speak with you about at this Shabbat service. And really both of them speak to the why and the meaning of why we do things. And in my case, the purpose and the meaning behind the reporting that I've been doing these last 22 years. I estimate, actually, over the last 22 years since I started in Binghamton, New York, that I have interviewed more than 10,000 people. And 10 of those people, the families and the circumstances that landed them in our newscast, wound up being the subjects of my book, More After the Break. And I really felt that after doing stories under these relentless deadlines and working with a photographer to start a story at 9 in the morning and get it on the air by 5 o'clock at night, and doing that process thousands and thousands of times through the years, there were just certain stories that I felt deserved more, and I felt that viewers and readers would also benefit from understanding how it is that reporters like me actually get people to talk to us, and also what it's like for journalists like me to be with people on the best days of their lives and the worst days of their lives, and what might be the most chaotic or tumultuous days of their lives. So the first thing I wanted to tell you about was the why. Why did I write the book? I've been writing 90-second news stories for 22 years, so I did view it as a challenge to embark on writing an actual book, which was much more than the 250-word stories I've been working on all of these years. Instead, I had to write 250 pages. But actually, whether you've converted or maybe you know somebody else who has, we're an interesting bunch. And part of it, I think, is that I was recently taking classes on Judaism and really analyzed closely as an adult, as opposed to growing up with it, some of the holidays. And I've certainly sat in temple on many Rosh Hashanahs and Yom Kippurs, very interested in the concept of making amends and asking for forgiveness and wanting to go into the new year feeling like I had asked for forgiveness or apologized for some of my actions during the prior year. And I realized that there were many years that I was sitting in synagogue, both here at Temple Bnai Jeshurun and then later at Temple Emmanuel, and my mind would return to some of the people I had covered on the news. And I wondered, after I left their houses, after the live truck pulled away from the scene, after the story aired and their names faded from the headlines, how did people view that interaction that they had with me? Were they happy that they opened the door and invited me into their house for an interview? Were they satisfied that they shared the details of their personal lives with the general public? And interesting to me really was they may have agreed to do the interview on day one, but did they eventually regret it for some reason? And I wondered if I owed people an apology. Had I rushed out of their living rooms too quickly to make my deadline? Had I not been empathetic enough in those moments when I was thinking about my professional obligation instead of really honing in on what they were experiencing on that day? So I'd like to think that the why behind the writing the book really did emerge from my spiritual journey, which started right here at Temple Bnai Jeshurun. But as I continued writing the book and really taking a much deeper dive into these stories that I've worked on over the years, what I realized was that it wasn't just the why of writing the book. It was actually the why of my entire career and what I had been looking for and trying to achieve, and I think in many cases did achieve over the last 22 years. And that is a sense of purpose and meaning, and asking other people to look inside their own hearts to be grateful for the blessings in their lives. And I do think part of that really comes from being adjacent to so many people over the years who are experiencing something really challenging. So, look, the book in many ways did allow me the time and the bandwidth to go back to some of these situations and examine what happened after we left. And I went into these asks, by the way, with a good degree of humility. I wasn't necessarily expecting people to welcome me with open arms. And as I mentioned, I was prepared in some cases to make an apology. But what I realized in reporting the book and in investigating more all of these stories that I selected was that not only were people agreeing to trust me now a second time with their story, their life story, but they were also teaching me a very valuable lesson, which is that you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it. And I think that the reason that readers have found my book so hopeful and inspiring, and frankly different in many ways than, for example, other books written by reporters that may have much more to do with politics and some of the things that divide us, is because the book really has a very unifying message. And it looks closely at the way that the media and journalists like me act sometimes as a bridge between someone who's experiencing something and the community that genuinely wants to help them in those moments and finds out about these things through interviews that I procure and that you eventually watch on the news. So I wanted to tell you briefly about two stories that I feature in my book, and then, as I said, I would really love to hear any questions that you might have about news reporting, my faith journey, or any other topic that you find interesting. So the first person I wanted to tell you about is Zaina Madihan. Zaina is a very interesting person. She was only 10 years old when I first interviewed her in May of 2018, and at that time, 3 weeks prior, she had survived the Paramus school bus crash, which happened not far from here on Route 80. And the crash tragically resulted in the death of Zaina's best friend. And her parents granted me a series of interviews where Zaina talked about surviving the crash and how she was doing at that time. That was 4.5 years ago. During that time, since that day, Zaina has spoken before Congress. She's spoken at the State House in Trenton. She has sent emails and had meetings with lawmakers and presented a list of suggestions about ways to make school buses safer. And every single child in the country today is safer because of Zaina Madihan, because the lawmakers agreed with her. And she really found her voice by doing these interviews on the news and putting her story out there for people. There were dozens of children who were severely hurt in that crash. But this one child decided at age 11 to go to Washington, D.C. She was invited by Congressman Josh Gottheimer to speak on the floor of Congress to ask for GPS on school buses, bus drivers with suspended licenses to no longer be able to drive children around, and better seatbelts for kids on school buses. And it worked. She's a sophomore in high school now. She's still coping with what happened to her, but I'm proud to say that she not only is in a chapter of my book, but she and I have also been speaking to various groups. I spoke at her high school last week, and she actually spoke at an Englewood Hospital group with me the week before, and it's been incredibly rewarding and inspiring for people to hear about when you use your voice for good and you stand up for what's right, the positive change that can happen. And finally, before I take your questions, I did also want to mention a person named Chris Clemente, who was actually the subject of my Columbia Journalism School Master's Project documentary all the way back in 1999 and 2000. I spent months working on this thing. And Chris, in 1990, was a finance student at Wharton, at UPenn. Straight-A student, academic rock star. Unfortunately, Chris's brother had taken a different path in life. And Chris went to visit his brother one weekend in Harlem on a break from school. And he was in his brother's apartment waiting for his brother to come back when the police came knocking. And unfortunately, Chris was arrested and charged with the drugs and guns that were found in his brother's apartment. And he was later sentenced to 16 years to life under New York's Rockefeller drug laws. So by 1999, when I was making a documentary about mandatory minimum sentencing, Chris Clemente's father was appearing at various protests around New York and advocating for the overturning of these laws. And he connected me with his son, who my partners and I started to correspond with while he was incarcerated at Greenhaven Correctional Facility. And in fact, we went up there to meet him in person, and we interviewed him, and we told his story in this documentary. And I kept in touch with him over the years, and I'm happy to report that 22 years after I first started corresponding with this person, he's returned to his roots as a finance professional. The Rockefeller drug laws were amended and later abolished in 2009. Chris got out of prison, went back to college, not a Penn, it was too expensive, but he did go back to another school, got his undergraduate degree, got a master's in finance, and now is a certified public accountant, a CPA, and he runs his own tax firm. And so I look at that situation as one where if I or any of the many other journalists who covered Chris Clemente in the 90s, by the way, he was on the front cover of the New York Post after his arrest with an enormous headline that read, "Ivy League crack dealer." It was a very salacious story at the time. And that really led to part of what wound up happening to him with his conviction, despite the fact that none of it belonged to him. But I will tell you that returning to the stories after all these years really does crystallize the why. Because of the relentless pace of news and always chasing that deadline and making sure I get my script done in time and get in front of the camera in time, I just haven't always had the time or the perspective all these years to actually reflect on what the impact of these stories are. And the impact of the stories really is shining up a mirror to the community, because in many cases, the reason that people are doing so well and the reason that people have been able to overcome the adversity and get through the challenges that landed them on the newscast in the first place is because of people like you and people in the community who step up and recognize when there's a need and are there for other people when they need it. So, with that being said, I thank you so much for your attention, and I'd love to take any questions that you might have.
So questions from the coming over here, and please know that Jen is going to be outside after. You'll be able to get her book, and I think she'll sign them for you also.
Sure.
So yes, please.
So I would assume a certain amount of your stories come from accidents or unfortunate things that happen in our community. Are there other avenues where you get leads for stories? What other leads do you get to move you on to your next story?
Sure. So we get tips in all kinds of ways. Sometimes we might be rushing off to something like a natural disaster or some sort of an accident like the situation in Paramus, but I also cover education stories and environmental stories and even human interest type stories. The Rockettes, for example, which is right next door to us at 30 Rock there at Radio City Music Hall. So my expertise is really based on a geographic area, which is the New York, New Jersey area, right? Our media market encompasses 20 million people, but I don't have a subject specialty, which I enjoy. I like doing a lot of different types of stories. These are very broad. Right.
Hi, Jen. Thanks for coming. Have you ever been asked to cover a story that you disagreed, where you had like a moral or ethical issue with whatever was going on and you didn't want to cover it? Like, what happens in that situation?
I wouldn't say that I've had a situation where I just felt like, oh, I can't cover that story. I'd like to think that it's not that I always agree with what people are saying. While I might not share my political opinions with our audience, I'm a human being and I certainly have them. But I think part of my job, I'm not an editorial columnist. I'm trying to report on what's happening in our community. So part of my job is to seek out people who may have a range of opinions. And I actually think one of the great blessings of the work is the opportunity that I have had to speak with 10,000 people who represent a range of diversity over just about any metric you could imagine, right? Whether it's geographic or socioeconomic, religion, ethnicity, age, anything. And political opinion, by the way. And so I think that things work better when people talk to each other, even if they think that they don't agree with one another. I mean, I'm in the communications business, so maybe I'm biased, but I do think that a lot of avenues open up for people to bridge their differences if they actually just spoke with each other face to face.
Good evening, Shabbat Shalom. You mentioned with Chris and with the New York Post glorifying Ivy League crack dealer. I guess it's a comment, or if you have any comments, why isn't there a headline, Chris, prior convict or crack dealer, successful CPA? And I just think, I'm speaking for myself or maybe some more, but the news just turns off so many people because of its negativity, and it just glorifies the bad and forgets about the good.
So there's a couple parts to your question. I will say, not to be up here as an apologist for the New York Post, but I will say the New York Post actually was interested in doing a follow-up story on Chris, and he was a bit nervous about engaging with them again because I think he was concerned based on his treatment the first time. I would say in general, I think NBC New York is a bit different to the other question that was asked. I am reporting on quite a few stories that aren't really in that salacious category, things about education or the environment. I do think there's a much larger issue and something to think about, especially for the younger people in this room, because I think it is their generation that will probably figure it out, which is how do you continue delivering substantive, unbiased news to the public when the market forces seem to be going in a different direction? I mean, people in this room, I'm sure, used to subscribe or buy newspapers for a variety of reasons, in addition to the investigative journalism, which, by the way, has never been profitable and never will be. But you used to need a newspaper for things like stock prices and the weather and real estate listings and classified ads. And all of those ad dollars have gone elsewhere. So the big question, and in my mind, the billion-dollar question right now is, the news can't be based and judged, and stories can't be reported only because they're going to be liked or shared or retweeted more times than another. There has to be a space for unbiased and substantive reporting. And so the question is how to continue delivering that when the ad revenue that used to undergird the whole system has gone elsewhere.
The billion-dollar question. Good segue, because you have questions from the next generation here. Young man, please.
My question is, what was the most intense case you had to cover?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say one of the most intense things I've had to cover was when I went to Mississippi in 2005 to cover Hurricane Katrina. And so that was, it happened before you were born, I suspect. But that was obviously a storm of historic proportion. And the one thing I always think about, I was working for Eyewitness News at the time, and the station flew me down for just maybe a week. And I always think in those situations, well, at least I get to go home. But the circumstances that we were reporting on, with people having their homes destroyed, no power, no water, no gas, people couldn't get gas for their cars. I may have been reporting on it, but I was also living in that situation. And as a 28-year-old reporter, only in my third year of reporting in the New York area, I also felt a lot of personal pressure there to do a really good job.
So I know there are probably other questions. I'll give Lynn one last one, and then Jen's going to be here to answer questions after.
Yeah, I'm
and
not
to sign
rushing
books.
out. Come and chat.
So you get a piece of cake and go talk to Jen. Lynn, you have the last word.
Jen, whatever happened to Chris's brother? Was he ever found or convicted? Chris, took the blame for things that he didn't do. Whatever happened to the brother?
Well, he didn't take the blame. He actually pleaded not guilty.
Right.
And you're familiar with the Chicago 7 case and Bill Kunstler? Bill Kunstler was his defense attorney. So it wasn't as though they didn't try. They mounted a very serious defense. He was still found guilty. Incidentally, he continued to correspond with the sentencing judge while he was a prisoner at Greenhaven. The judge told him there was nothing he could do because the Rockefeller drug laws mandated these minimum sentences for first-time nonviolent drug offenders. But to get back to your first question, Chris's brother was murdered. A year after, he went to prison, and Chris was not allowed to leave for his brother's funeral.
Wow. You know what? I'm gonna just because it ended on such a
maybe we should. Can we take one more question, please?
I know. Yeah, I know. But you want to stop your family from asking the question? Here you go.
What is the most calmest report you have done?
The calmest?
Calmest?
Like calm.
So instead of intense, which is one ask, now we want calm, and I might add optimistic and hopeful, given the end of the last subject. Right, that's what you meant, right? Optimistic and hopeful? That's what I thought, okay.
Well, that's a very interesting question. I have not been asked that question before. I'm trying to think of the most relaxed I've been on a news story recently. I guess it would be reporting on something that I really enjoy or that I find very interesting. So I'll give you a good example. Do you like race cars, Formula One races? Okay. Well, do you know about the E-races? Formula One is the street racing where they have the race cars and they go around places like Monaco, and it's very fabulous and loud because they're so fast with the gas engines. This summer, I had the opportunity to go cover an E-race, where it's the fastest electric cars in the world. And not only did I get to talk to the drivers, I got to sit in one of the cars, and also they explained to me that a lot of the technology that's coming through for all the e-vehicles that we might be owning or thinking about buying, a lot of the tech actually comes from the E-Prix that went on in Brooklyn this past summer. But thank you very much for that question. I love
from
that.
These two young people. So, Jen, we never talked about any of these things when you were converting to Judaism, but the depth and the intellect and the soul were always there. So happy to have you back here at home. I told Jen that we're doing a pulpit swap. I'm going to her congregation tomorrow morning to speak. So let's continue to exchange ideas for a long time to come. Folks, she'll be outside. There are plenty of books for purchase and for signing. But ladies and gentlemen, Jen Maxfield.
And congratulations on your new book, too. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. We, for our concluding part of our service, we turn to the middle of page 282. We ask you to please rise. Aleinu.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם. ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו
And now at this point in our service, we turn our thoughts to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people and those of every race and every nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them on this Shabbat, let us meditate on the meaning of love and of loss, of life and of death. As is our tradition here in our community, if you hear the name of one that you may have lost, please feel free, only if you feel so inclined, to stand to honor their memory. We first remember those who have passed during this 7-day period of Shiva. We remember William K. Lavin, husband of the late Eileen, father of Janine, grandfather of Hannah. During this period of Shloshim, the traditional Jewish 30-day period of mourning, we remember Carol Lipton, Diane Apter, Bernice Shobe, Robert Feynman, Donald Brief, Abe Rubin, Julius Margolis, Roberta Bloom Spiegelman, Dr. Bernard J. Topfer, Sandra Formaglich, and Dina Gerber. And on this their Yortzeit, their yearly anniversary of death, we remember Pauline Lorraine Abramson, Frida K. Berger, Seymour Blitz, Ray Bofford, Helena Cohen, Ida I. Commando, Howard Cooperman, David A. Dworsky, Florence B. Einson, Ruth Essenfeld, Thomas Fallis, Hugo Freund, Fanny Froelich, Moses Gansler, Dr. Burton, B. Gillette, Etta Goldberg, Emmanuel Goldstein, Rose G. Goldstein, Louis Goldstein, Edward Gottlieb, Bluma Harris, Irving H. Harris, Laverne Katz, David T. Klein, William J. Klein, Riley Kogan, Delphine Kramer, Adrian Christeller, Julia Coleman, Elsie Leichtman, Jacqueline Levy, Rochelle Lipton, Lillian Lohman, Edith Lubowit, Mildred Keller Marks, David K. Marks, Nathan Mayer, Gustav Mayer, Eugene Mercy, Lena Schloss Michaels, Fanny Bass-Negbar, William Orenstein, Arnold J. Palmer, Dr. Israel J. Rockland, Sidney Rabinowitz, Lee Rosen, Leslie Rosenberg, Dr. Sidney Rubin, Abraham Schindel, Ruth R. Schindel, Henry Schlinger, Boris Schwartz, Leon Schwarzenstein, William L. Seelig, Nathan Siegel, Jacob I. Seidenman, Leah Kreidel Seeley, Nathan Sellinger, Dr. Robert Schack, Marilyn Steyer, Isidore Silverman, Rose Harris Lifkin, Phyllis G. Sorkin, Ida Strauss, Marie Bramet Van Mappis, and Erwin Weil. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May the memory of the righteous be a blessing to each and every one of us praying here the Shabbat. And let's honor their memories by inviting their souls in to dwell among us as we indeed rise to say their words of Kaddish. They're found both on the screen and on page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah, biolma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agalau v'zman kari v'yimru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mivorach le'olam ulolmei al maya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesha barichu, la'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran biolma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru, osei shalom b'mromav, huyasei shalom, aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn here and those who are bereaved everywhere. As together as one community, we say, amen. Please be seated. Again, folks, please do join us afterwards for something sweet to eat, a moment to meet Jen, to purchase a book, to get it signed if you'd like. That will be after. Take your orders of worship with you or click on them online. And the only thing that I will highlight, it is Hanukkah coming, which is great because it's so dark outside. It's a good time to bring light into our lives. We are going to celebrate as a congregation on every age level in 3 different venues next Friday evening, afternoon, evening. Take a look at the website so you could see. All of you can be safe to know that we are celebrating here at 5:30. But try to get here a few minutes earlier because all 3 venues are coming together to light Hanukkah candles at 5:25 in the lobby. And so you'll get to enjoy the freilach of all the kids. They'll go to their own places. And if you want to, all the little kids in you, we are building the world's largest menorah next Friday night. After, you're just not allowed to take your greasy latke hands and build them. Otherwise, everything is free to do. So please do. What's that?
Out of Legos.
You like Legos?
Out of Legos.
Sorry?
Building it out of Legos.
Out of Legos, yes. We are building, what did I say, out of latkes?
You just didn't say what we were building.
Oh, sorry. He wants me to be precise. Yes, out of Legos, not out of latkes. Meanwhile, speaking of happy and meaningful events, Scarlet Rome is becoming bat mitzvah, and it's actually unbelievable to see how adult you look at this point, because we remember when you didn't. So we are really proud of you and so happy to share with your family. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock a.m., you come of age officially. But to continue that, or to really start that process, we're going to invite you up to say Kiddush and Motzi. And as you come up here, Scarlett, come on to this side. This is a Kiddush cup that already has some delicious juice inside of it. It's presented on behalf of our Brotherhood of Women's Association, and the sweetness within, we really hope will reflect the sweetness of this weekend that your parents are going to share, that your siblings, your cousins, you have very active cousins we see here, and we're really proud of you and looking forward to sharing this with you. So here you go.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav beratavanu b'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvraton hinhilanu zikaron l'maaseh v'reshit ki hu yom techila lemikra'e kodesh Zecher litziat Mitzrayim ki banu v'charta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'arim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava uvratzon hinchaltanu Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat.
Amen. Take a sip.
Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
Amen. Outstanding start. Looking so forward to tomorrow. Mazel tov to all of you.
Thank you.
You're welcome, kid.
Okay, that's for you to keep. We are going to bring our service to a close with a nigun, a song without words. All you need to say is Yai Lai Lai. Join us, please. Yai Lai Lai. Yai Lai Lai Lai.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. Shabbat shalom.